what actually ensures that a living being can realize the purpose inherent to its existence? Burkhard Heim formulated this question in a somewhat more complicated way, which sounds like, when is the ionic area of an entity televariant? In this video, we will examine these questions in relation to the procuration process. Hello and welcome to 6 Dimensions in Color. My name is Schmid, and on this channel I explain to you Burkhard Heim's worldview in understandable language and with clear examples. We learned in the previous video that all processes in the world are controlled by so-called maximes. Maximes can be regarded as the governing will of any kind of entity, if you will. So now we know, in principle, what happens in the 6th dimension, but we have yet to learn to differentiate it. Let's briefly repeat. About a single quantum object, we learned that it can realize a relative minimum or maximum in the next moment and has no preference to which way to go. Accordingly, from one moment to the next, either a negative or positive maxime is at work. In the case of macro-collectives, the negative maximes become dominant, realizing the most likely state, that is, that state which maximizes the entropy and, accordingly, the disorder of the whole system. But if matter is alive, then its organizational entities, structures, obviously extend into the beta and gamma realms, that of life and the psyche, and apparently positive maxime become increasingly dominant. These maximes are the prerequisites of the so-called Ilko holomorphism, which I talked about in earlier videos of this series. The Ilko holomorphism is the integrating instance that processes biological impulses and gives out control impulses back into the body. We can call it the soul if we lack a better word. Holomorphism means integration into a whole, which we recognize as life. As long as a creature lives, it is more than its material components. Any action or reaction of the Ilkor means an updating of its syndrometric structure, always according to its degrees of freedom and the coordination between the motivational complexes. Let's again recall a few videos back. The concept of televariance means that an action has an origin and a goal, or as a geometric metaphor, that the area that all the possible actions span in the transcendent realm is closed. The reason why Burkhard Heim set up all this abstract theory and why we had to go through it is we have to differentiate when is a maxime able to induce a televariant area, or when is a maxime telecentric. And now we are at the origin of that fancy word, syndrometric maxime telecentrism. Let's start our consideration with the simplest of biological entities, a single-cell organism. Brief reminder, its biological level of organization is 11, totality 11. Consciousness level is 1, the number of telechosynchroclines is 2, and the totality level of the Ilkor is as 20. This is its gradual structure, the metroplex gradual structure. What does the life cycle of a single-cell organism look like? We have one cell, and this cell has one Ilkor. So what happens when this cell divides, that is, reproduces? We know what happens during mitosis, that is, cell division. One cell becomes 2. And both cells are then indistinguishable. There's no knowing what is the parent cell or the daughter cell in most cases. Here's the first question. What is this moment of cell division in terms of the ionic area of the whole thing? In the possible life paths of the original cell, this is a point where this one cell enters, but 2 emerge. The second question arising is, what happens to the Ilkor? There's one Ilkor entering, so does the Ilkor split as well? In any case, the Ilkor must always be induced by a maxime. So what happens to the maxime? Is the maxime, that is the governing will of the entity, splitting as well, or does a new maxime come from somewhere? The question may become clearer if we look at the sexual reproduction first. When we think of sexual reproduction, we usually think of higher mammals or ourselves, but it also happens in plants, of course, and also in higher single-cell organisms. There are also mixed forms where sexual reproduction occurs only every few generations, and between it is mitotic cell division. But at first, both sperm and egg cell exist independently, at least for a brief period of time. And during this time, they also, of course, must have independent maximes, which maintain the cellular life functions. As soon as these germ cells fuse, this is evidently the beginning of the life of a new entity. From this point on, a new maxime must operate. In terms of our ionic area, this is evidently an initial telecenter, because individual life begins at this moment. More precisely yet, before that moment, only the individual maximes of the germ cells were present, and from that moment on, for the fusion process to occur, a new holomorphism must arise from somewhere or come from somewhere. After the initial telecenter, it is more than egg plus sperm cell. It must be more than the sum of its parts. Now back to mitotic cell division. What about individuality in this case? This question cannot be decided from the reproduction process, because here 1 becomes 2, instead of 2 becoming 1. That means no definite telecenter can be identified. The area at the beginning is open. Life certainly continues, but individual life has no beginning. There is also no death event, because this would mean a total interruption of the activity streams present between ichor and cell body. It means that the ionic area branches and splits as well. Of course, it means that the first ichor splits. And you can literally see this in the structural setup of the cell during the different phases of mitosis. Chromosomes are duplicated and drawn into different corners of the cell before the membrane is pinched and the two cells separate. The ichor structure and the activity streams are in this phase so highly similar that individuality cannot be distinguished yet. We should only be able to detect individual differences between the cells after a certain time. And until that, we should also be able to detect non-local phenomena occurring between the two cells. I'm not sure if this has ever been investigated, but it's a direct prediction from Heim's theory, and it's nothing else than what we know about quantum entanglement. Only in this case, it happens on a higher totality, on a higher intellectual level. The same question and process arises, by the way, in the vegetative propagation of plants. That is, if an offshoot is made or if you cut a sprout, etc. Surely, the new plant grows into an individual existence, but only after a while, as slow as plants grow. Maximes governing these processes, that is cell division and vegetative propagation, must be so closely interwoven with the biological matrix that this can be regarded the sole requirement for their presence. Such an entity Burkhard Heim called an extra maxime. Its area is disvariant. That is, there is no initial telecenter. It might be partially televariant in mixed form reproduction. In contrast, a definite individual beginning of life requires a maxime that brings the ability to integrate parts into a whole. Heim called this an inframaxime. Its area is at least partially televariant. It has an initial telecenter. It requires sexual reproduction and an intellectual level of at least 11. Complex thoughts like these are often difficult to grasp, but even the most difficult of topics become easy if we are emotionally adjusted to them. Then knowledge is absorbed intuitively and effortlessly. This is possible if you do the right form of mental training, and the only training I know of that achieves these amazing qualities and inner states is NATHAL training. If you're curious about this method, go to my website nathaltraining.ae or visit my Instagram channel. To summarize this video, life forms which use the simplest form of procreation, mitotic cell division, are in 6 dimensions described by an area that is not televariant. Individuality has no clear beginning. In comparison, sexual reproduction will result in an area that it is at least partially televariant, because the germ cells are integrated into a whole and form a more than the sum of its parts kind of entity. That all was now about the beginning of life, so it concerns the initial telecenter. Naturally, the next question we are curious about is what happens at the end, when life ceases. What happens at the end of the area and when? Is the area actually open or closed? If you're curious about this question, subscribe to this channel because this is going to be the next topic in 6 dimensions and in color.